Nielsen is the Secretary of Homeland Security, and she joins us now. Ms. Secretary, thanks very much for coming on tonight.
My pleasure.
So what is the executive branch doing now to fix this?
Well, you probably don't have enough time for me to tell you all the things. I mean, look, just as you said at the top of your introduction, the president predicted this as a candidate. He predicted this before he was a candidate.
Right.
He continues to show leadership and to raise the alarm bells, but only now are we starting to see in mainstream press, not on this particular channel, that there is a crisis, and that's what there is. So what we're doing is we have announced that we are sending more migrants back to Mexico to await their immigration proceedings. We are pulling folks from the ports of entry to help interdict those who are choosing to come here illegally. It is a crime, despite what you just showed sitting senator saying, it is a crime to come illegally between ports of entry, to stop them and to provide humanitarian assistance. By the smugglers, they are coming through remote areas. They're sicker than we've ever seen before.
Yes. So will we see an executive order from the White House to make E-Verify nationwide, to punish employers who are setting the bait in this trap, who are encouraging illegal aliens to come into this country?
That is part of the problem. I mean, I think what you saw also in the clip that you showed is many of the people coming are economic migrants. They are not truly seeking asylum.
Right.
We want to help those who are, but many of them have been given magic words to come in and to get a job and take that job away from an American. So we are looking to increase rates at E-Verify. We've made it easier for employers to comply with it, but we're looking to do everything we can throughout the system to apply penalties where we can.
Well, how about this? Why wouldn't your agency write an executive order, present it to the president, have him sign it, and do it tomorrow?
Everything is on the table. We'll do everything we can within our authorities.
What's the argument against doing that?
There's just a debate with Congress as to whether the executive branch has the authority to do that. We can expand the program, but right now it's only authorized in a voluntary way, not a mandatory way. So we can do it, but as you know, what happens when we do is we get enjoined by the courts. So it's one of many issues we're looking to work with Congress on. We'll continue to drive that.
Do you think, I mean, it looks from, I mean, you probably have fresher knowledge than we do out here, but it looks like Congress is not going to act because one party has a vested interest in changing the population and the other party is in effect controlled by people who want illegal immigration. So would there be a downside for the president to act unilaterally on that question or for example, birthright citizenship? Would you be willing to draft an executive order eliminating birthright citizenship?
I think, Tucker, I think the president's been clear. All of that is on the table, including to close down the border. Right. We have to stop this flow into our communities. We have to stop the drugs. We have to stop the smuggling and trafficking and gangs. Right. He's very serious about it. So, yes, I think everything is on the table. In the meantime, I remain optimistic in the sense that I refuse to believe that the United States Congress will not act. It's not a partisan issue.
But no, it's not. And of course, I agree. And we've spent, countless hours on making that exact point. But here you have a president who ran on the promise, it really was this central promise of his campaign to secure the border. And things seem less under control now than they did then. And so when you ask about it, the answer is, well, Congress won't act when everyone knows they're never going to act. And so it does seem a little like buck passing. If you see what I mean.
Yeah, I do. I would say I would expand that group a little bit. You mentioned the courts.
Yes,
we have
sure.
a lot of, in my opinion, court decisions that do not understand the full situation, the operational realities that we face every day.
Right.
But it's also the criminals, and I think you saw that in the clip too. The smugglers are more active than ever before at advertising how to come into this country with a child. We've broken up so-called child recycling rings, if you can believe it, in the last couple months, which is where smugglers kidnap a child, they give it to an adult to cross the border, present themselves as a family. Once they get in, because as you know, we can only hold families for 20 days, they send the child back and bring the child back with another family, another fake family, another adult. So the criminals play a huge part of this. We're working to crack down on all the transnational criminals, the gangs and smuggling and trafficking. But I cannot be clear, and I don't think the president can be any clearer. He will take every action within his authority to stop this flow.
Yeah. So does the U.S. government know exactly how many people are living in this country illegally? I've seen academic studies that put that number between 11 million, 22 million, maybe more. What is the real number?
We debate it. I think that's accurate.
So we don't know.
We do not know, no. And part of that, think about it, part of it is because we do not have the wall that the president continues to advocate for. We cannot in every circumstance tell you who is crossing the border. We have a much better
you
handle.
run a law enforcement agency.
I do.
You have many roles, but,
right.
but it's law
the
enforcement.
Largest law enforcement
exactly.
agency in the country.
That's right. Probably the world, actually.
Yeah, probably.
So that must be a grave concern to you that we potentially have more than 10 million people here whose identities we don't know, could be over 20, whose identities we don't know, and like they could be anybody.
Yes.
And so why is that not the single most pressing problem the country has?
In my opinion, right now, this is one of, if not the biggest crisis this country has faced in a decade. Truly. I mean,
right.
The security aspects of this, the humanitarian aspects of this have got to be addressed. So I agree with you. This is at the very top of our list at DHS. We've announced today that we're now treating this like a massive Cat 5 hurricane disaster. We are bringing all of the interagency together. We're asking everybody to chip in. We need to surge down as many resources as we can to the border. But Congress needs to look at this as a hurricane too, right? Where is the supplemental? Where are the additional authorities?
Of course.
Where is the way to address this?
But I mean, I've covered hurricanes and natural disasters, and you see men in uniform with rifles. You see the National Guard there.
Yep.
I read a bunch of background quotes from flag officers in the United States military who said that's a frivolous duty for us. We've got a real duty is over in Syria or whatever, some other country. Why wouldn't we put the U.S. military along our border if it's really a crisis of that magnitude?
I think we're looking into that. We've made the request. I'm in constant contact with the Acting Secretary of Defense. I talked to some of the combatant commanders today. We are, in fact, pushing more and more military resources to the border. And that's what's required.
I mean, but the president is the commander-in-chief of the military. Would it be possible for him to say, we're moving troops to the border tomorrow? And this is, I mean, he could say we're moving troops to Venezuela tomorrow if he wanted, but he can't do it to our own border?
No, I think he absolutely, of course, has full authority to defend our country.
Right.
And I think that's what he's moving to do. I mean, his statements in the last week about closing the border are a perfect example. He will take all action that is required to do this. So yes, it's on the table. We're actively moving in discussions about moving more troops down now. We're working with the National Guards, working with the states, but absolutely DOD plays a huge part of this.
So just one last question, and I don't even know if you have an answer, but why is it that the press, many in Congress, don't seem to recognize the magnitude of this? Do you think it's that they don't know the details, or they don't care? Do you want to speculate as to why no one's responding?
I mean, look, at this point, I'll be blunt. I think they're blinded by politics. Unfortunately, they are blinded for what they see as a request from this administration instead of looking at the requests and the way in which it is directly affecting Americans. I mean, you mentioned fentanyl.
Yeah.
Last year alone, CBP and ICE interdicted more fentanyl to kill every American 4 times. I mean, the effects that this is having in American society cannot be understated.
I agree with that. Do we have any sense of how much got through without being interdicted?
We do not, but the good news is the president requested and did receive additional resources at the border to interdict drugs, and we are actively implementing this. But to your point, the facts don't lie. So I don't believe that they don't see it or they don't understand it. They are just willfully choosing to ignore it. But the more Americans who suffer, they're going to have to look at this. I hope they do it sooner than later.
I hope so too. Thank you very much.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Here with more on the potential impact on our economy from all of this, Arizona Republican Congressman Andy Biggs. Congressman, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Charles. Good to be with you.
The avocado toast sort of made the headlines, but we are talking billions and billions of dollars exchanged by both sides. We're talking about a supply chain where auto parts go back and forth before we get the finished product. But President Trump acknowledges that may be the hit we have to take because security is priority number one.
Yeah, that's right. You know, we did this after 9/11, if you recall. And in Arizona, in the Phoenix metro area, illegal drug trade and human trafficking dried up in about 5 to 6 days. That's what happened when the border was shut down. The problem that we face today, of course, is that back then the entire country was unified, that we had to take a security measure that was pretty extreme. Today, we're trading more, And we actually have 50% of the country that probably doesn't even think there's a problem. Certainly 50% of Congress doesn't think there's a problem along the border. And they're not acknowledging the security issues that we face. You know, but the president's trying to get at this because we got to have Mexico's help in this. And Mexico's not doing a thing as we see 2 more caravans coming up through Mexico today.
Congressman, we are hearing more of your colleagues saying, okay, acknowledging it's a crisis. They've been backed into a corner after Jay Johnson said 1,000 apprehensions a day was a bad day. Obviously, 4,100 in a day is just catastrophic beyond it boggles the mind of how bad it is. So have you spoken to any of them in the last 24, 48 hours about perhaps being more realistic about this problem?
Well, I've talked to 1 or 2, and they're still kind of dug in. And I will say that they're moving a little bit. Before, it was because they didn't want President Trump to get a political victory. Now it's like, well, we don't quite know what to do. And that's really kind of where they've moved. But there's still a significant number of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle that say there's really no problem. It's a manufactured problem. Look, you got Beto O'Rourke that says, let's tear down the fences. And I just don't know what it's going to take for these people to understand the reality of over 1 million people apprehended in this current fiscal year. That's what's going to happen. And we're only going to get about 1/3 of the people actually crossing into the country. So you're going to look at 3 million people will have crossed this country by the end of this fiscal year.
I know Julian Castro today put out the piece suggesting maybe decriminalizing it. So that's a solution. It's not the one I think Americans want to hear. You talked about Mexico earlier, sir. President Trump, though, said that he did see them stepping up. They're starting to make apprehensions at their southern border. Thousands of people for the first time in decades. They have the ability. They have tough immigration laws. Is this what you want to see as well?
Yes, absolutely. You know, they do have tough immigration laws. Their immigration laws are tougher than ours by far. And you know what, if you can get Guatemala to also help enforce that northern border, you have a chance to really cut down, because the number of people that are entering the country today are largely coming from the Northern Triangle states. And if those 2 countries can get their act together on their border, then that's going to help us on our border. But we've got asylum laws that are just out of whack right now, Charles, and it's a real problem.
I want to switch gears a little bit because you are on the Judiciary Committee, and Jerry Nadler, Representative Nadler, he's pretty adamant about going after the Mueller investigation. Everyone's waiting to see how many of those 81 requests for information become subpoenas. What's your thoughts on just how adamant he and other Democrats are on still chasing the Mueller report?
Well, he seems to be locked in. I heard that only about 8 to 10 people had actually responded to his request. I understand he's going to issue subpoenas. Now he wants Attorney General Barr to come in. He'll probably expand it to Rod Rosenstein. Who knows who else he's going to want to come in. But they're so distraught because they put all their eggs in one political basket, and that was that Donald Trump and his campaign colluded with the Russians to impact the election. And it just wasn't true to begin with. And they told the American people something that they couldn't substantiate. So they're going to continue on this path. And I just don't know how far down they're going to go. But Nancy Pelosi doesn't seem to be able to reel him in. Maxine Waters is out there. Adam Schiff is out there. Elijah Cummings is out there with Jerry Nadler. They're all in on this thing. And I don't see any end in the near term.
Do you feel like they're trying to intimidate A.G. Barr?
Oh, yeah, definitely they do. They want to intimidate A.G. Barr. But they're left with nothing left, right? Because there's nothing left for them to attack, because they put all the onus on the Mueller report. They said what a great report it was going to be, that there's evidence, and now there's not. So it's a problem for them.
Congressman, always a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Charles. Have a good one.